Davidson. In 2018, I graduated from seminary, and before I graduated, I took a class on violence. In this class, we had to do a certain assignment where we unpacked a certain type of violence to really look at all the different factors. I ended up doing an assignment. My assignment was around the gun violence. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and we have some of the worst rates going on. We had them in 2017. We have them in 2008. We had them in 2018. We have them in 2019. Right now is a huge amount of attention, and unfortunately, we are losing a kid almost every other day to gun violence. So I decided to share some of the things that I've learned, that I put together, that I see what's going on, um, and I titled it "The Revolving Chamber of Gun Violence: The 8 Factors That Feed the Epidemic." For this is a health issue. This is a spiritual, health, economic issue. So I'm just gonna get right into it because there's a lot to deal with. So before I go any further, I want to let people know that one, I am a victim of gun violence myself in different ways. One, my dad was murdered, and his killer was found out guilty. And I want to make sure I'm clear. And I think it was Jay Nugaburn who said a husband or a wife loses their spouse, they become a widow or widower. A child loses his or her parents, that child becomes an orphan. There is no word for a parent who loses a child. That's how awful that loss is. I want to make sure that I give my condolences and my heartfelt love to those who are losing children to this senseless violence. And again, I'm speaking on gun violence, but this applies to violence in general, but gun violence in specific. Also, I want to share a quick story of my fourth grade experience. I was outside playing basketball at my elementary school. This is a picture of my elementary school. Someone came up and started shooting at a kid who was playing basketball at the hoop closest to the entryway. My friends and I were playing basketball in the middle hoops. Somebody started coming up, started shooting. This wasn't my first time being around guns. This was my first time being around guns that were being shot. This was my first time at guns being pointed in my direction. All of my friends, we dropped down. Thank God nobody was hurt. I share people that I was baptized by water in the church, but in third grade. In fourth grade, I was baptized by gunfire. When I went down to the ground, I came up, I was no longer just a typical fourth grader. I was a pissed off, angry, mad young man. If anybody would have gave me a gun and said, "Hey, Marco, we know who just got done shooting at us. Let's go get them back," I would have taken that gun and said, "Let's go." That's how angry, that's how mad, that's how pissed off I was. And unfortunately, the young man that was being shot at, he's no longer with us here. He's no longer with us. He was killed later on down. So again, this is just some of the statistics from the district, the U.S. representative district that I live in. These are some of the statistics that I saw in 2017 and 2016 before this. I was like, whoa, this is terrible. This is bad. Because I'm thinking about the number of children killed or injured, and the number of teens killed or injured. And then I think about, wait a minute, these kids have to continue living. Their classmates have to continue to deal with the loss, their family members, their communities, their neighborhoods. Then there's so much more to that. Mass shootings. Mass shootings means 3 or more people get shot. And often, it really should be called mass murder. That's another topic for another day. So I'm just get right into this. Because again, the victims of violent crime by age. This is tragic. This is what we are dealing with. I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly because you can do the research yourself. Majority of research has already been done. So I really want to get to the factors. And there's so many different sites you can go to. One was the Gun Violence Archives. Vox does an amazing job of keeping track of all different things that are related to gun violence. First factor, guns themselves is a factor. It is an actual factor in gun violence, of course. But the thing with guns versus other weapons or other things, guns is definitely an act of permanency. Okay, but just the accessibility of guns is rampant. Not only that, the advancement of technology in guns have definitely transcended past human compassion. So when we look at when somebody pulls a gun on somebody, my dad told me, you pull a gun, you better use it. Not only that, like that's not the best advice in the world, first and foremost, right? But now that the way bullets are created, they're not just round balls anymore. They are the way the bullets are created now are usually used to when they hit somebody, they separate, they spread, so you may not be able to get all of the fragments out. The whole point of these bullets now are intentionally to kill. Okay, so guns themselves is a huge factor. Exposure to violence, culture, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I'm not talking about just video games and things or movies. No, nothing like that. I used to love playing Grand Theft Auto. I've never stolen a car. I used to love playing Call of Duty, James Bond. I've never shot a gun before. Okay, culture. The culture is what influenced people to say, "Oh, we're going to retaliate. Oh no, we're not going to tell the police." One, because we already know who's shooting at us, and two, we can handle this ourselves. Also, uh, when we actually have been involved in certain things, when it comes to the environment and the culture that we see, it's historic. We have a historic, violent culture here in America, especially around guns, especially around racism, including into that. But then not only that, there's the community violence of it. 1/3 of girls and boys across the country. So we can talk about urban neighborhoods, communities. We can also talk about rural communities. Ages 10 to 6 years are victims of direct violence, some type of direct violence. Even more, children have faced indirect community violence. So we see these things happening, and we have to recognize that when one child experiences violence, their classmates see it, their community sees it, their family sees it, they experience too. So we need to deal with that. And we are dealing with understanding guns and understanding all this exposure. Sometimes it can lead to nihilism. Nihilism is really major in certain aspects, especially in certain communities. The theologian Cornel West mentioned that the nihilistic threat facing Black America is primarily a question of speaking to the profound sense of psychological depression, personal worthlessness, and social despair so widespread in within Black America. This comes out of his book, Race Matters. And in other words, threats the threat is the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical condition of America that continues to bombard America with the sense of ruthlessness that creates a toxic culture. He also shared that nihilism is the lived experience of coping with a life of horrifying meaninglessness, hopelessness, and most important, lovelessness. The local activist organizer here in St. Louis, Kayla Reed, said, when you combine lack of resources, concentrated poverty, and divestment, you get violence. This is what we are experiencing. This is what we're seeing. So when people say, "Oh, I can't believe the kids are doing this. What's going on?" Like, look at their community. The African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. Who raising the village? So a lot of our children, a lot of people are experiencing nihilism. I'll get into that, to touch on that a little bit later. The next is opportunities, a lack of. When it comes to education, 1.2 million students are dropping out of high school in the United States. That's a student every 26 seconds, 7,000 a day. Not only that, total number of U.S. jobs outsourced in 2015, over 2 million jobs being outsourced. Very few jobs being created. I'll get into that later. But these things are affecting the community. When some certain communities were built around manufacturing jobs, were built around principles of the Industrial Revolution, these things are being phased out. When these jobs leave, when these factories leave, the community has a tendency to either leave with it. The financial mobile people in the community leave with it, and that begins a whole host of problems. So another factor, Constitution and laws. Yep, Second Amendment, you guessed it. Let's be clear. The Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment was based partially on the right to keep and bear arms in some English common law that was influenced by the English Bill of Rights from 1689. 1689, they didn't have the same type of technology or guns that we have today. In 1689, they did not have the colonists did not have a full working army. They didn't. They did not have a government that was spending, I believe in 2016, over $580 billion annually in military forces. They didn't have that. We got that now. Our laws have to adjust and adapt over time. We have to do something about that. It can't. NRA. I don't want to get too lost on this stuff. Just letting it be known. NRA members, for those who believe, who want to hold on to this identity because it's part of their culture, because it's part of their identity to hold on, to be able to say I own something. We need you all to say, hey, leadership, stop funding people who would turn around and say insensitive things. Stop funding the politicians who turn around and say insensitive things to that jeopardize the well-being and the mental and emotional state of children. You all can see it for yourselves. Next, identity. I got to keep it moving. Next, identity. Children normally get their identities from their parents. America leads the industrialized world in fatherlessness. But again, looking at the culture, looking at the environment, who is nurturing these children? Who is nurturing the communities that these children live in? Scripture says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. If I don't know who I am, if I don't love who I am, if I don't love the neighborhood where my neighbors live, then I don't have a problem doing something that is not in my best interest. I don't have a problem with hurting my neighbor. So when young people don't know who they are more easily influenced to do what the culture or the environment or somebody else tells them to do. And when you have this concept of nihilism and don't know your identity, it's real easy to go with the defense narrative. I don't want to get caught up on this too much because, listen, if somebody gets a gun and they have ill intent, they're going to figure out, or if they don't have a gun, they're going to figure out, they're going to use something else. Okay, we've seen it. Like, oh, I can't get a gun. I'll just use a vehicle, use a car, whatever. It's tragic. But a lot of people have guns with the intention of protection. Unfortunately, there are way more fatal, unintentional shootings. It's too many. It's too many young people who've gotten shot and killed by guns that were supposed to be used for protection. And then the parents end up getting penalized. So I don't have an answer. There's something that can be discussed later. They get in trouble for child endangerment and get locked up. And it's a tough one. This is a tough one. Defense narrative. We have to look at that. And again, with the concept of going back to the gun and the technology of guns, we'll always feel like we need to have more power, more firepower, more capacity to be able to one up the person that could possibly have another type of gun. So we'll get into that later. Empathy or misplaced empathy. This one is probably one of the biggest factors when it comes to the public and the media, because the media does a great job, or people use certain narratives. They focus on individuals instead of root causes. If it's a white racist team per se does a school shooting or something crazy, they say, oh, he was a lone wolf. It was just this one incident. Oh, well, just 2 weeks ago, they was arresting white teens and white males left and right that was ready to go and do some major damage and had a bunch of guns. Right? Again, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Their culture is shaping them. They are learning to hate. They're learning to do these things. They're learning to stockpile weapons. You don't just that's not normal. It's not. Let's be real. It's not. When something happens with a black teen, like, oh, where was his parents? Or what their community? Is oh, we need to penalize them harder. I'm so sick and tired. And we need to listen. I understand. We want to be upset. We are heartbroken. We are frustrated. But again, if they don't have a clue of who they are, if they have a sense of nihilism, they don't care about laws. Laws don't mean anything. Their ego and their pride is that probably doesn't mean anything to them. So saying, "Oh, you will get the death penalty," these people have already emotionally died. They don't care. So we have to be mindful and careful of that. And also, uh, let's be real. Segregation in cities is a serious barrier to any kind of empathy. MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. The well-off and secure have too often become indifferent and oblivious to the poverty and deprivation in their midst. Public safety. Narrative is mostly led by politicians and police departments for control of resources. How did you learn what the word public safety meant? Where did you first hear it? What does it mean to you? I'm willing to bet if you ask that question. No, I'm not. We need to have real discussions on what public safety means. Public safety does not equal more police. It equals better trained police. It equals better trained police who understand their implicit biases. It equals police who definitely receive better services, better emotional, mental health services. It equals that, but does not equal just more police. And usually, we end up believing that we can arrest our way out of these situations. We can put on harsher penalties to get ourselves out of these situations. That's what public safety has been in the past. It is not working. We cannot arrest our way out of this. So when you add all these up, I know it seems a little hokey sometimes too. I'm gonna be honest, but I recognize, like, man, if we don't work on all of these factors at once, this is what we get. We don't deal with the guns and how powerful they are, the exposure to violence, the nihilism that is rampant in our communities because of poverty, the lack of opportunities because of bad business practices. Business practices that are have been adopted by America. That profit means more than people. The Constitution and laws refuse to budge or change because people benefit, companies benefit off of the high production of rifles and guns and other weapons. When we continue to train and teach our children and don't allow them to develop their own identity and continue to use the defense narrative and misplace empathy, we end up with genocide. I know some of y'all saying, "Whoa, Marco, genocide, that's a huge word." We automatically correlate that with the Holocaust or the indigenous people being genocide here at the beginning of America. Again, a violent history. The amount of people who are killed by guns in America each year are equal to some of the smaller genocides that have happened over time. And we look at the number of people who are killed each year. So mind you, I created this in 2017, at the beginning of 2017. So this is before Parkland. This is before Vegas. This is before the summer of 2019 where we losing a kid every other day. I was inspired by this book by James Waller called Becoming Evil: How Ordinary People Commit Genocide and Mass Killing. In the book, you can read it for yourself. It talks about the creation of conditions that materially or psychologically destroy or diminish people's quality of life. It talks about a collective violence becomes genocide when a specific group is systematically and intentionally targeted for destruction. I know some of y'all are wondering, wait a minute, which group? There's no group. We'll get there. I'm going to read the whole thing from the United Nations, but you can see the underlying portion. Create conditions calculated to bring about their physical destruction. America participates in the creation and allowance of self-inflicted genocides among the poor and working class. So, this is not going to stop anytime soon. We have a culture of gun violence, that it's a health epidemic, which is fueled by poverty, is not going to stop anytime soon. It is evil for America to be the richest, one of the most richest, one of the most powerful countries in the world. And yet we have this type of violence. If any other country in the world had this many people dying, America would probably intervene. So I'm not one just to talk about problems. I'm gonna give some solutions that I think may be helpful. There are so many solutions out there. We can do so much better. I'm doing just run down real quick. I look at them from standpoints of love, laws, and legal action. I like alliterations. Okay, I like alliterations. But first off, here at least in St. Louis, and I'm sure this probably works with other places across the country, is to fund, take action, and implement the actual signature priorities from the Ferguson Commission report. That's numero uno. If your politician, if your senator, representative, if they are not saying, according to the Ferguson Commission, according to this signature priority from the Ferguson Commission, if they're not saying that, get up and leave. The work has been done. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, there has been so much time and energy and finances and resources put into this by some of our brightest, best minds, hearts, and souls. And we still act like, oh, we don't know what to do. Start there. Numero uno. Number two, fully support intervention programs like Cure Violence. It was formerly Ceasefire. I learned about Ceasefire when I was doing this project in 2017 because I looked at Chicago. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. That's amazing. Chicago is huge, but their violence was concentrated in several different areas. They made amazing impact. We're discussing this right now here in St. Louis. The mayor want to give a little bit of money, like it's a trial run. No, Kayla Reed suggested $2 million off tops. I agree with her. Establish where you can provide resources, $100,000 for each 0.5 mile radius in poverty-stricken communities for each year for the next 10 years. Where the money come from? I'm glad you asked. You can start by divesting from failed institutions like closing the workhouse. The workhouse costs the city of St. Louis $16 million each year. It's not worthwhile. The people that's actually in the workhouse, majority of them haven't even been charged or haven't been charged guilty of anything yet, and they can actually go to the regular justice center jail. $16 million. That's the money right there. What else can you give with that $16 million? On-scene emergency social workers. There are so many times when things are happening in the communities, when people see the police tape, people see bodies, and then sometimes you just have police officers who should not be penalized for seeing therapists and counselors. Because the job is hard. My brother's a police officer. I tell people this all the time. My brother's a police officer, and I want him to come home safely. I also want my nieces and nephews to come home safely too. I want my nieces and nephews to come home safely to my brother who is not dealing with PTSD from being on a police force. My dad was a firefighter and a Vietnam vet. I've seen and lived with PTSD in my family. So on the scene, emergency social workers. I don't expect police officers to be able to go into every situation. It's the reason why we have firefighters. I don't want a police officer going into domestic violence or dealing with a rape situation, and it's two male police officers and a woman has been sexually violated. After the police officers make sure that the place is safe, secure, there should be a social worker right then and there. So to work on these things, and that can include people who are working with Cure Violence. Also, we need to increase the number of counselors in our schools. At least one counselor for every 30 students. I don't know why. There are some schools that have more security guards than counselors. This is what we talk about when we talk about the cradle or the school to prison pipeline, where students interact more with law enforcement, law or authority figures than they do with counselors or therapists. Classroom size in certain communities, they don't need to be no bigger than 10 or 15. I once worked at a school and a fifth grade classroom had 30 students. One class, 30 students. And these kids dealt with so many different things in that neighborhood and the community. Learning was almost impossible in that classroom. The teacher had the greatest classroom management and the biggest heart I've ever seen. But that's a lot of work. I was like, why do we not have at least 3 classes of fifth graders with 10 of them each? So they can really get the individualized attention they need. On-site health clinics at middle schools and high schools, which includes vision, dental therapy, and physicals on site. Recently, some of the hospitals did some listening sessions, and they realized that we got to take these services to the students. And now some of our high schools actually have clinics, and they've already seen a major drop in a lot of the different issues. The thing is, by the time some students get to high school, sometimes the damage has already been done. Middle school is when kids start developing their own self-agency. And also they start developing resentment for their parents because they start recognizing that, wait a minute, my parent or the guardian or the adults in my life and the adults in my family are not setting me up for success. That's when they start recognizing that in middle school. That's when we need those services right there. Hey, and this is something that I'm personally working on, is figuring out what it would take to be develop a public boarding school. Some of our communities, some of our homes do not foster an environment for safety, for security, for basic needs. Unfortunately, because of so many other factors, it has created I worked in schools where they didn't even send books home, or they didn't send homework home. Anyway, I'm moving on. PE, art, music, STEM, and business programs fully funded during the day, during school. I'm not talking about an extracurricular activity after school. After school can be an enhancement. After school can be, okay, we're going to have music for 1 hour, but if you want to participate more in school band or concert band or whatever, it's after school. Like, I don't understand why we think we can keep cutting out the things that literally stimulate the brains, literally stimulate the consciousness of young people. We keep focusing on standardized testing. Again, the Industrial Revolution way of working is not success anymore. We have to eliminate out-of-school suspensions, pre-K through 12. Children emulate the actions they see. They emulate the behaviors they see. Suspending them from school and leaving them, putting them back in that environment where they got these actions or behaviors from, probably ain't the best idea. And there are way too many other options versus out-of-school suspension. Please do the research. It's available. We have to start emphasizing not just the intelligent quotient. Intelligent quotient is, can I regurgitate this information? Can you say something to me? Can I repeat it back to you? Do I have a way to memorize certain things? We have to also emphasize the emotional quotient and the adaptability quotient. Emotional is, something happens. How do I respond to what just happened? Do I get angry? Do I get mad? Do I get sad? Do I find it humorous that something bad or tragic just happened? That's emotional quotient. I was once teaching kindergartners and first graders on how to stay calm, on how to not be impulsive, all these different factors. The school that I was working at said, "Oh, sorry, Mr. Davidson, today gonna be your last day. Although the kids love you and although the teachers love you, and they say that the students definitely actually behave different after you leave, we're gonna have to cut that time out because we need more time for standardized testing." Kindergartners and first graders, adaptability quotient. So one thing to how do you going to respond, but how do you show up? How do you adjust and adapt? How do you apply the things you learn to real life? And I say these three for last, because of course this is where everybody go get into a tizzy, right? Ban high capacity clips and guns. No more than 8 bullets. What you shooting at? Right? I don't. People are getting shot. People getting shot three at a time, or somebody was just unload a clip and spray a whole front porch and hit multiple people. This is again, they did not have it when the Constitution was written in. They did not have high capacity rounds. They didn't. It didn't exist. I'm sorry. I know what AR stands for. Armor armor light rifles. Okay, they still are they are still in the similar family as the M16 that is used by the military. Semi-automatic, single shot, high capacity. That's the issue. Okay? The caliber of the gun, the types of bullets they accept, and we're in America, the country that that's been said. Gun registration and licensing must be mandatory. No grandfather. I had a conversation with somebody recently. He told me that his dad passed away. He wanted to sell some of his dad's guns to help his mom out. His dad had 80 guns. He called the ATF to check to say, "Hey, what do I need to do in order to sell these guns? What process do I need to go through? What licensing? What do I need to do?" They said, "Where you live at, Missouri? Oh, you can sell them to whoever you want, as long as they're Missouri resident." So no following the serial number, no registration, no anything. If somebody passed away in my family, I can't just get their car. I gotta get the license. I gotta get the papers. I gotta get so many other things. I gotta get all that. I just can't say, "Oh, it's my car now." That doesn't happen like that. For a car, for a vehicle. When I was 16, I took driver's ed. Had to get a license. Had to take a test. So come on. We gotta be more clear on these things. And finally, like gun laws gotta be created by the counties or at least by cities and not by the state. It's too many. It's too many places in America where the areas the people come from areas that are making gun laws that definitely affect the urban city areas. I'm in Missouri. I live in Missouri. A lot of rural people in Missouri make laws, and St. Louis and Kansas City are getting demolished, especially St. Louis, getting demolished because of the gun laws that people who don't live here are making. We got to change that ASAP. So hopefully some of these things make sense. I love people. I love humanity. We can do better. We learn. We can grow. We can adjust. We can adapt. Culture does eat strategy for breakfast. It's time to change our culture to a culture of love, of compassion, of empathy, of development, and letting go of this theory that all that profit means the most. We gotta let go of that. So whatever you do, please figure out where to go, who to talk to, work on one of these. We need people on all of these factors. It's that huge, it's that big, all hands on deck. It's not just one thing. But recognize that the one thing you want to work on, the one thing that you are passionate about, do that as well. But make sure you connect with somebody else. So if you are a mentor like me, I mentor young people. I can't do it all by myself. I make sure to connect with people who are in law enforcement or people who are clergy, who actually organize throughout the night, who organize in the community. If you are somebody who is a gun advocate, teach gun respect. Teach people to respect guns. Respect the power of guns. Teach young people this gun does not make you any better than the next person. Like work on these things. Work on all these different things. You go teach people how to shoot. Teach them how to farm too. Teach them how to fish also. That we gotta have to work on this all together. It's all hands on deck. If not, 2019 will look like 2018. 2020 will look like 2019. Are you tired of going to kids' funerals? I hope you are. Let's grow. Let's love.